Welcome back, Warrior Family.
I knew you were gonna sing a song, but I still
how'd you
didn't
know?
care. I was sitting there thinking what rhymes with family before we hit record, and I couldn't think of anything.
You know, what's funny is that I've definitely sang that one before. And so it feels like by now you should have come up with what rhymes with family for yourself.
Sounds like you want me to perseverate on this and obsess about this.
Bringing it to the topic early. We're not going to have our witty, ridiculous banter where our ADHD kicks
this
in for
totally works. Our witty, ridiculous banter. This is it, right? But it's witty because I brought in the topic.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're so smart. Who's a smart bear? It's you. Abby's making silly faces. Okay. Audio medium. All right. So, warriors, we are going to be talking today about rumination, obsessive thoughts, and a little bit about like perseverating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just basically when our thoughts are assholes.
Yes. I think that's a great title. When our thoughts are assholes.
Can we have explicit titles? I don't even know.
I think we could have a-hole.
Okay. Something to look into after we record.
Yeah.
Okay. But so Abby, tell us your thoughts. There it is. Tell us your thoughts about thoughts being assholes.
Yeah. So I personally, right, and I am not an expert. I am not saying anything that someone has said to me. I've just thought about ruminating thoughts. I've thought about obsessive thoughts, and I've thought about perseverating thoughts. And for me, all three feel different. Okay. Other people might feel like obsessive thoughts are ruminating thoughts, or perseverating thoughts are obsessive thoughts, or whatever it is. But for me, they're different. So for me, ruminating thoughts are the worst. They really are. They are always negative. They're focusing on something, I would say more often past experiences, but could also be about the future. And they're ruminating. So they're cycling over and over and over again. Right. So there can be some perseveration and obsession in it.
Right.
And then often those thoughts want me to feel bad about what they're thinking about. Right. Like, oh, that was so embarrassing. You're an awful human. Right. Or I can't believe you did that thing when you were 6. Or, and so rumination, it's super negative. It's super judgy, and it doesn't want me to forget about it. It's like, sit in this discomfort because you were a human being. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obsessive thoughts can be about anything. Did I lock the door? Did I close the garage door? I'm excited for an upcoming event. Oh, do I need to make my, list of groceries that I need to buy, right? So obsessive is exhausting. Ruminating thoughts are exhausting too, but they're like mean and negative. Obsessive is exhausting, but it's not usually about negative stuff, and especially not towards me. Right? Okay. It's just like obsessing about all the things I have to do that keep cycling in my brain.
Right. And they're not always negative is what you're saying.
Yes. They can be busy. They can be overthinking. They can be tiring thoughts, like, because there's so much.
Yeah. But overwhelming.
Yeah. And sometimes they could be negative, but they're not like, once it becomes like ruminating, it's got a different flavor to it, where it's like attacking me and wanting me to feel bad.
It doesn't anchor to the negativity.
Right.
Necessarily.
I might think of things, and then like it might be like a negative thing, like, oh my God, did my dog get into this? And then I keep thinking what worst case scenarios that could happen with my dog, and that's negative, right? But then if I couldn't let it go and I kept thinking like, what's wrong with me that I let my dog do that event, then it would turn into ruminating.
Right. Yeah.
And then for me, perseverating, right, is when my mind focuses on random small things and thinks about it a lot. So like sometimes I really like words. Like there's words I like I like the word Patagonia. And so sometimes my brain wants to perseverate on that word and like feel the word as I say it in my mouth. Right. Or if I find a new favorite song, I need to I perseverate on needing to hear it, either hear it through like Spotify or Apple or whatever, or just hear it on repeat in my brain. And that's like me perseverating on something that's like more small and not really overthinking about anything, but like focus on one small point.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
It's confusing. I mean, like when I was thinking about three, because you presented it to me in these three ways, obviously before we recorded, when we were talking about this like weeks ago, even. And since then, my head was trying to figure out how I view them differently or if I do. Yeah. And I really struggled. Like, I appreciate a lot of the language that you use because it's helping me to frame how I view them in, you know what I mean? In a way.
Yeah.
Because I agree on some of those terms. And then not that I disagree or it's like that, that's incorrect. It's more about just like, I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah.
Which is why talking about it is helpful. I mean, I definitely agree on like 98% of it. That's pretty much what I had come up with in my mind on like how I view these three separate ideas. But for the most part, I really feel like there's so much gray area with all of them that it's hard for me to, if you said, hey, Margot, that thought that you were just explaining to me that you had, where would you dump that? Like which category would you dump that in? I'd be struggling really hard because it does feel like all of them are intertwined in such a really intrinsic way.
Yes. I'd put them in a Venn diagram. Like they can be connected, right? Yeah. They're like definitely like related. They're in the same family.
Exactly. It's the repetition is where, right? It's for me, it's like, I guess I struggle more to think about the differences between ruminating and obsessive because to me, they feel pretty much like different spokes on the same wheel. Like it's just literally something that cycles and turns and turns and turns until it eventually stops turning. Now, when you said about the negativity and about this sort of self negativity, that's where my brain was like, that's interesting. And so I like adding that layer to it because I do feel like, having that distinction between the two just helps me, right, to understand myself better and to say, okay, maybe I can better label what may have triggered this type of reaction or this type of thought. Yeah. Right. And like noticing thought patterns is definitely a mindfulness practice that I've been doing forever. And so I kind of like the subtlety, right? Because I always struggled before to be like, I don't really know the difference between these three things. And I don't want to perseverate on them. I really don't want this to become something else that I now have anxiety about. Like I already have enough anxiety living in my thoughts. Do I need to have anxiety about what type of anxiety I'm experiencing in my thoughts?
Right.
But it is helpful, right, to have it in a non-judgmental conversation with you about exploring those subtle differences.
Yeah. And just for me, like, I'm not like going around defining these for everyone or anyone like that. But like for me, it helps because it really helps me slap a label on it quickly enough. Like, I'm having obsessive thoughts about the garage door, right? Like, and I can work with that. Or I'm having ruminating thoughts, which is for me, it requires different practices because the ruminating thoughts are very nasty. Right. And so for me, that label helps me move forward in understanding the type of thought so I can figure out what I might need or, to do in that moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love that. I mean, so for me, the coping strategies are the same. And so, right. So that's what I think that's part of I guess if I needed something different for one thought versus the other, maybe I would be basketing them a little bit more or more often, but it's pretty much always the same, and again, we'll get into it, like the same category and the same order of steps that I need to take in order to sort of move past the, all the asshole thoughts.
Yes. That's yes.
Put them to our episode title.
Stay away.
All right, Abby. So let's like jump into the rumination a little bit. Let's dance in it. Let's dance and wiggle in it just a little bit. I want to say you're ruminate just a little.
Yeah.
No, off track. Okay. So share with us about how this has shown up for you.
Yeah. And I'm going to talk about it with rumination, right? Okay. I feel like I've talked about obsessive. Perseverating is a little bit more fun, right? But
fun.
It's a little less heavy. But yeah, the rumination part. So I I guess where it all starts from the beginning, and the beginning is when I was young. And I always, like, definitely in my teens and in my 20s, all the way through my late 20s, I had ruminating thoughts. They might have had flavors of obsession and perseveration, but like they were ruminating and they were dominant.
Mm-hmm.
Problem was, even in my mid 20s, when I had the label of anxiety, I didn't really realize that the ruminating thoughts were connected there. And I didn't know that they were ruminating thoughts.
Right.
I wasn't even aware of them. Right. They were just part of my daily life of me overanalyzing everything and blaming myself for everything and feeling embarrassed and mortified about things that are out of my control. Right. And that was normal.
Mm-hmm.
So they were exhausting. They drove me nuts. I, would like talk to my friends and overanalyze and overthink everything. And I felt very like isolated and alone because I had friends that didn't really have the same experience as me. So for me, ruminating thoughts were a lot more in my teens and in my 20s. Happened all the time, but it was mostly like they would show up in downtime. Right. So if I was busy working 5 jobs, I didn't have as many ruminating thoughts. I was busy doing stuff. I would go from teaching to waitressing or babysitting or working at the Gap. I was interacting with people. And then I would have a hard time falling asleep at night because my mind would ruminate on everything that happened that day that I did wrong. Everything that happened that last week, month, year, decade that I did wrong, or if there wasn't too much to ruminate in the past, which, come on, there always is, right. It would then agonize about the future. And so that was pretty much how it was for me in that time. Now, what I will say about ruminating thoughts is that at some point around the age of like 28, something like magical happened. And there was a lot of things happening at once at 28. I had a mindfulness practice. I had a yoga practice. I had just learned that not every thought you think is true. So that was going on, which was really helping me in a lot of ways. But the other thing is just like all of a sudden there was this quietness in my mind. And what I honestly think it is, but I have no proof of why I think this, is I think like my brain finally became a grown-up brain at 28. Right? Like we talk about how all the parts of the brain aren't fully integrated for children, for teens, for people in their early 20s. Right. And I feel like when the integration like really happened around 28, there was something that quieted in my mind. And maybe all these practices helped it. Mm-hmm. Right. But I don't really know. So anyway, my point in saying that is I haven't experienced much rumination the way I experienced it in my teens and my 20s. Like in my teens and my 20s, it was nonstop all the time. Mm-hmm. Now it just pops up here and there. So when I was in my teens and my 20s, there was like a lot of things that I did to cope with the ruminating thoughts. But I wasn't aware that I had ruminating thoughts. No one was like, oh, this overthinking and constantly self-blaming yourself, that's rumination. And right? Like no one said that.
Sure.
So I didn't really understand what was happening. I, felt very alone, like I said before. And I did a lot of coping behaviors that probably weren't healthy, but at the time I didn't even know I was coping. Right.
Sure.
So the first thing is that in my college years and in my earlier 20s, like I drank a lot. And I wish I didn't. But at the time I just thought I was being this carefree, fun person. Right. But obviously now in hindsight, I was doing it to quiet the thoughts in my head because they were so damaging. They were so exhausting. They were so awful and they were nonstop. But when I was drinking, they slowed down, right? And alcohol would help me fall asleep, right? Did I get great sleep? Probably not, but we're healthier in our 20s.
Sleep was sleep.
Yeah. So that was one way, except for that the awful thing is that, of course, when I'm drinking, I do things that are embarrassing, right? I don't even want to think about them, but I just thought about them. And then the next day, I ruminate on all the embarrassing things I did the night before when I was drunk. So it's an endless cycle. The other things that I would do for coping is like I would journal about it. Like I would journal my overanalyzing down. And in some ways it was cathartic, but in other ways it was just giving the ruminating thoughts more
power.
Attention. Yeah, more power. Yeah. Like I've reread my old journals and like I've said this before, but my whole theme is like, what's wrong with me? Right. And like it's in my journals. And like so the ruminating thoughts still got more power, even though in some ways it was a cathartic experience to write it down.
Yeah.
But like another thing that I would do to cope with it is there was so much chaos in my head. Like really, like when you're constantly tearing yourself down, when you're unaware of all of these ruminating, obsessive, busy, heavy thoughts, right? It's like a lot of chaos in the mind. Like, what do you want to do? You kind of want to get it external, right? You can control that a little more. At least that's how it was back then. So I would like start drama with people. You know, I was definitely way more dramatic in my teens and my early 20s. And that was a way for me to like, one, help navigate the chaos in my mind, right? But then also have a little bit more control over it at the time. So that was like another way of coping with the ruminating thoughts. But this is all to come to this story, which is basically, like I said, I haven't experienced that many ruminating thoughts recently. I've had a lot of obsessive thoughts. I've had a lot of perseverating thoughts. Rumination comes and goes, but it hasn't been like that can't fall asleep at night because I feel so uncomfortable with something I did years ago.
Right.
Until recently. Which is when I texted you weeks ago and I was like, hey, let's do ruminating thoughts.
I love the way we do that. To each other.
People are like, how do you get ideas? And it's like, we just live our lives.
we move through the world as anxiety warriors. That's it. That's the secret.
Maybe she's born with it.
Anxiety. So good. That's going to be one of our next merch items.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes. Stay tuned, warriors.
Oh, yes.
So anyway, so basically like a few weeks ago, I'm sitting on the couch. Nothing's happening. Nothing is happening to trigger this. And I instantly am brought back to, I can't even remember if it was 2015 or 2016. Okay. I think it's 2015. And I'm brought back to my dad being in the NYU recovering from surgery. And there's a ton of doctors and residents. See, even right now, my stomach is clenching. Yeah. It is so uncomfortable.
Visceral.
And I was lonely. My dad had just gotten diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, right? I'm in the middle of going through a 5.5-year breakup with my person at the time. And I'm just like seeking like stability and connection. I just want to connect. And I am so grateful for these doctors and these residents and these medical students. And I was with a couple and one medical student like said something and I wanted to connect. And by connecting, I said something like ignorant. And I'm still embarrassed about it. So I'm not going to share what I said. But that thought fell in my head a couple of weeks ago and I couldn't fall asleep that night and I couldn't stop thinking about the next day and I couldn't stop thinking. It didn't matter. Like it didn't matter my circumstances. It was like, how could you say something so ignorant? How could you say something so stupid? You know, like what is wrong with you? And then I was like, oh my God, ruminating thoughts, how I've missed you. Like,
hello, old friend.
I didn't know I was so grateful until right now that I haven't had you for so long, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was rough. And like my usual go-to practices, like somatic holds and reframes and self-compassion, none of that forgiving myself. It was like, no, what you said was dumb, you know? And yes, right. I agree. It's still dumb, but also at the same time, like, would I take it back? Yeah. Do I realize it was ignorant? Yeah. Was I trying to seek connection? I wasn't like thinking about what I was going to say. Yes. Right.
Yep.
And so the only thing that really helped with these ruminating thoughts this time was watching them and observing them with a layer of curiosity, like, oh, interesting. Oh, okay, you're
Yes.
going there with this ruminating thought. Oh, you want to bring that up too. Okay, that's interesting. Right. And that was like, I think in some ways the only way that they finally passed.
Interesting. So what was and you don't have to say exactly what it was, but like, what was the feedback narrative? Like, was it just that I'm dumb, I'm ignorant?
Yeah.
Like that was literally the thought that was the main anchor. Like,
well, I can't believe you said that. I can't believe you said that. That was really dumb. That was really dumb. And the person reacted fine enough.
Sure.
Did I offend them? Maybe. I don't know. Like,
you wonder too.
It's like to track them down and apologize, but this is like 7 years ago.
It's like when someone else is involved in your ruminating thought, you can't get that closure or something.
Yeah. Like, right? I hope I didn't offend this person.
Sure.
I don't know.
You don't know, right?
And
so it's like trying to figure out how to live with the fact that you'll never know how that person took your statement. Right. I mean, like they might have stewed on it for exactly 30 seconds. They may not have even given it a second thought, or they may be thinking about it right now. I mean, so just like having those unknowns, right? It just makes sense that it's something that would land on you. And because, I mean, look, part of it, what I'm about to say is just because I know you and I know you, on a deep level, is that part of, I think, why sometimes what we can, I'll speak as a collective, like why we can ruminate on things that we have regret about saying to another person. Yeah. Is because at the end of the day, we know that that's not who we are. Right. Yeah. That's not the best indicator of the type of human being you are. Right. And you were at a very low, terrible place in that moment. And again, it's not an excuse. It's just the reality of your situation. Right. And so like when you said the forgiveness piece, it's like, how can you even get back to that? Right. It's like, and my question is, had you forgiven yourself at any point? Or do you think that's why this still comes up randomly 6 years later or 7 years later?
I mean, I don't exactly know, but my like feeling around that question is that I did forgive myself. Right. Because especially like after my dad passed and all this, like I did a lot of work. I did a lot of practices. And I think that I did, but I think with this particular ruminating thought, it was like, hey, remember that time? Let's see how much I can make you like squirm and feel uncomfortable now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds really uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. No, really. It's just, I think most people would be, right. And you know why? Because it brings up things from our own past. Right. We all have things that we wish we could take back, and it doesn't necessarily have to be something that may or may not have been offensive. Right. But we wish that we could just go ahead and rewind that tape and edit that little part out, but that's a dangerous place to live too. Right. Literally taking back all the fuck ups, because at the end of the day, maybe, right, these are the moments that help to shape us if we're good people. Right. And we are trying to be good people at the very least. Right. These are the moments that if we're reflective on them, maybe it's sort of a gift, a reminder of like, I still have work to do. Right. A reminder of like, I'm an imperfect human. Right. How can I show up better today? Right. Like look how much I've grown since then. Like whatever it is, you can start telling yourself. It's like, maybe the reminder, the reframe could be that, thanks Rumination for that reminder that I'm a different person now. Yeah. Or how much healing I've done. Yeah. 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 And I mean, the thing is, even though what I said was ignorant, it really came from a genuine wanting to connect with the person. Yeah. Right. I genuinely liked this person. I genuinely wanted to connect with them. I thought by sharing this thing, it would connect us. I mean, I impulsively thought, I didn't like sit down and think it over. Right. Sure. And that's the other thing is like, for me, it allows me to also, if other people maybe say offensive things to me, I can try to see the intention underneath it. Right.
like I obviously wasn't being flippant with this person. I obviously like, you know, like
Right.
it came from a genuine wanting to connect place, which I hope they noticed. Um, and curious. I was being curious. I was asking them, you know. And so, but for me, if I can also remember that when I interact with others, if they say something ignorant or offensive or whatever, can I see the intention underneath it? Are they trying to be an asshole? You know,
Right.
are they just ignorant? Are they curious? Are they seeking connection? You know what I'm saying? So like when I see it through that lens too, it also helps me navigate other people, because dealing with other people can be challenging too.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, and I just love the idea that you can also ask the person what their intention was too. Right. And so having that knowledge now too, it's like, can you even find the information out? Maybe by posing a question to the person speaking to you, you can gain some information about what their goal was in sharing that thing or saying that thing or asking you that question or whatever. And you may not get the answer you want or seek, but then at least you have more information about where that person's coming from.
Right.
So maybe you could help release your potential future rumination on that thought or interaction, right? By maybe a lot, if you can get some clarity early on about what the deal was with the situation or comment or whatever.
It might help the other person.
Exactly.
You know, like if that person said to me, hey, why are you saying that? Right? Why are you asking that? That's a weird question. You know, that's an interesting thing you just said. Yeah. I would have paused and been like, oh, wait, why am I saying this? Right? Sometimes we all just talk. We all just, and so if someone asked me, like, that would be really, really helpful. Right. And so that's the other thing. When we can be more curious with others, we might get more information too.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, they can get information.
Yes, I knew what you meant. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks. I'm hoping that ruminating thought does not return, and I hope the rest of them stay away too. I'm busy with obsessive and perseverating. I'm good there, you know? Good there.
Can't have time for all of you kinds of asshole thoughts all the damn time, please.
Yeah. So
too much.
Yeah. What about you? What is your relationship to a ruminating thought, story, time?
You know, after like talking at the top about how we can view these different types of thoughts, you know, I've come to embrace, right, the main difference between ruminating and obsessive is the negativity piece, right? Having a negativity bias in my own anxious mind all the time, right? And especially when it comes to actions that I've taken, things that I've said and done, how I've reacted to things and people in the past. And so one of the biggest shifts for me from my adolescence and my, like you had mentioned, like when you were younger, like your non-adult brain. So in my non-adult brain, you know, so my teens and into my mid to late 20s, kind of like you shared, my reactivity was just through the roof. Like my impulsivity, my anger, right? Like even with a mindfulness practice that wasn't anywhere near as strong as it had become in my 30s.
Yeah.
Because I was mostly focused on the, you know, breath work and asana parts of my yoga practice and less about meditation and doing some of that inner work.
Yeah.
It was hardcore avoiding that at all costs for, again, in my, you know, my late adolescence brain and stuff like that. So I think when I was thinking about this topic, that was the part that I wanted to touch on, was my reactivity to things. And then later on, obsessing about and ruminating on how I should have reacted to different things in different situations.
Yes. Oh my God, like the shame.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you said shame and then pause, and I was like, is she going to say something else? And then I just thought about the word shame, and it just allowed it to cloak me like a freaking blanket.
That's the thing, is like, I mean, I just like, I so relate to the fact, like the reacting, especially with rage, and then the overthinking, shame, and ruminating in that after, like that was yeah.
And do you go back and repair? Even if it's with yourself.
Overthinking is like, yeah, what do you do with all that? Yeah.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. I mean, so And so like I could get into a bajillion stories about my former reactivity. And look, I still have plenty of moments where, something happens or I'm in a heated discussion with someone or whatever, and I blow up. Right. And that's just me. And then some of it is just like, if I'm in a dysregulated state or I haven't had some water in the last hour, like it could be a number of factors. And so the story I want to share is actually pretty recent. And so not dissimilar to yours. It was something that happened recently, though. It wasn't something that I had experienced years and years ago. It was within the last, half a year of my life. Around the summer, I had a 40th birthday party. We talked about it here on the pod. And I had some stress going on because the dessert that my husband, Adam, had ordered for us to take on this wine tour that we were going on out east for my birthday. It was a whole debacle about this cookie cake, and I wanted it so badly. I had literally sent him like Instagram posts from like the year before. On like my 39th birthday, I was sending him shit to get me for my 40th birthday, things I wanted very badly. And so, trying to make a long story shorter, they had made the wrong number for me for my birthday. It was a 21 instead of a 40. Big fucking difference there if you want to rub more salt in the wound, right? And then they told me that they couldn't fix it. And I was really upset because this was like one of the few things that I desperately wanted for my 40th birthday. And so, I reacted, and I feel like I had a measured reaction because I wasn't the one that had to deal with them. Adam was the one that had to deal with them. So he had to experience the wrath of me and my reactivity and then relay my feelings in his way, thankfully much calmer in this cookie shop, And so again, like everything wound up getting fixed and worked out, and the outcome that was delicious and wonderful. So we move on. Not too long ago, there was an Instagram post that was made about the situation. And so my birthday was back in July. And so this post was probably sometime in, I want to say late December, maybe somewhere in there. And I happened to be scrolling just my feed, and this was at like midnight, by the way. Shouldn't be scrolling at midnight, everyone. Another quick PSA, but I wound up seeing this post, and it was the cookie cake, and it wasn't the one that I wound up with because that was a 40, as it should have been. It was the 21, and I was just like, I happened to see it, and I paused for a second. I had like a warm memory of like having this delicious treat for my birthday and having all of the things work out.
Yeah,
and I read the business's caption, and it is basically a little bit of a rant about this drama that had went down, right? And she had prefaced it with like, oh, I know my audience loves drama, because I guess in the previous week she'd been posting a lot of stuff that had been going wrong with previous customers, and everyone was eating it up because people love to be jerks on the internet. Yeah. And so she thought she'd share this story, right? And she went into this whole like, woe is me, and I did everything I could, and pearl clutching and forehead, hand to the forehead type thing. And like, I'm being a little bit of a bitch right now as I retell it, because it was very frustrating. This like very heavily omitted.
I mean, I know some of the story, and I think you're being nice. Honestly.
It was.
I don't think you're being a little bit of a bitch,
right? I mean, I
getting into
showed it to you. I sent it to you. I sent it to a few other people that knew the circumstances around the situation. Anyway, my instinct, right, was to blow up on this person. I was ready to just like, write a full comment, DM her privately, email, write a terrible review. Like I was ready to do all the things. And so the story is a little bit of a serious win for me, even, years into having a much stronger mindfulness practice and being able to recognize when I'm stewing on something and when I'm about to react in a really poor negative way. That's not just going to impact the person I'm sharing my negativity with, but myself, right? My body, my mind, my heart, my soul, all the things it's going to wind up harming. And so my first step, right, was to just notice that I was freaking out.
Yeah.
I was just completely freaking out. I was like, and it was midnight, and I immediately went flying out of bed and ran downstairs. Adam was doing something on his computer, and then we had like a 25-minute conversation.
Yeah.
And so like, I did react, right? At the end of the day, I did all the things that my former self would have done without saying anything to the person that caused the harm yet. Right. And so I look at these things as a win, right? And when we get into like some of the self-care practices, I'll share more about it, right? Because I noticed that I needed to stop before I said and did something that I would later regret. And so like, I had a ton of rumination of like all these horrible memories from this moment brought up then thoughts of maybe you did overreact, Margot. Why didn't you want that 21 cake? Maybe you should have just been lucky that these are first world privileged problems and that you should shut the fuck up about stupid cake, right? Stupid cookie cake. And it was like all of the, and then it was, and where the negativity came in, right? Which is like when we were defining what makes rumination different from obsessive, it's just like, I am a terrible person for giving a shit about this and allowing this, clearly this person who wrote this post, this business owner was dealing with her own shit in that moment and needed self-assurance. She maybe has some discomfort remaining about what happened, right? The whole situation. And again, you guys are getting the bare minimum of what had happened. It was a long drawn out story from July, but otherwise she wouldn't bring it back up and do it in a public space. Right. And she didn't call me out specifically. She wasn't like she tagged me and like was hoping that I would see it. I mean, maybe she assumed I could see it, but she's got thousands of followers, who knows. Right. And so, and that again was part of my thought process was, wow, this person's suffering. This person's ruminating. Right. And so again, when we get into some of the strategies, but at the end of the day, I wound up being like, all my thoughts are about what's wrong with me. I did something wrong here, even though I'm the one sort of being attacked at the same time. It's like, oh, hold on a second. This isn't an interaction I'm having. This is somebody sharing something outwardly that is not meant for me even. Right. And so when I had that clarity too, when we were talking about your story and it's like getting the clarity, trying to be curious about that person's intentions or your intentions or whatever is very supportive. It is really helpful at the end of the day because that was where the rumination stopped. Yeah. Right. That's where the loop stopped when I was able to sit with it, really sit with it before reacting, allow it to happen. Right. Experience the rumination. That's as uncomfortable as it is. It's like, and always keeping in my mind, like, I'm going to get through this. Yeah. I'm going to get through this. Yeah. Right. And so like, I wanted to share this in particular story because I mean, again, like everything we talk about on the pod, we could share a bajillion stories about all of these topics. Yeah.
Except for oversharing with you.
Yeah.
But aside from that one.
Yeah. Aside from that one. Exactly. Very, very well reminded. Yeah. So like this was a story that jumped in my mind because it felt like a success in that I was able to move through the process of ruminating thought about like, you should just, you fucked up. It was you the whole time. Right. And then the other big one was, what should we do about this? Right. I should do something. I shouldn't sit on this. I should allow my rage to pour from me. Right. And,
fight the threat, fight it.
Right.
Fight it.
Exactly. And so instead I wound up handling it in a very different way. And so, yeah, that was my like mini win within the ruminating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, for both of our stories, there's this hopefulness, right? For people that have ruminating thoughts that, it can change, right? Because like my anxiety has changed over time. Your anxiety has changed over time. And what it sounds like is both of us had a different relationship with ruminating thoughts when we were younger. And things have shifted.
Totally.
And who knows if it was because of our practices or age or whatever it is. And I also love in both of our stories how, well, actually I didn't share it this time, but I've shared it before. Just how you and I are, I think, we're good people. I'm not saying I think, like, I know we're good people. We really try hard. We are so passionate about life skills and mindfulness and self-regulation. And yet we would fucking rage when we were younger, right?
Oh, yeah.
And even now, the rage happens, right? It doesn't matter how many practices we do or teach or have. Like, I love that part about both of us is that it does, we love a good mindfulness practice, but also that rage still shows up.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that you said passionate. That's such a great way to like make it sound good.
Yeah.
I like feisty too. We're both spicy. We're spicy. We have big feelings. And I think a lot of that is just, it's hard to contain.
Yeah.
And some of it shouldn't be contained. Right. And I think that's part of what can be amazing about ruminating, right? It's like, obviously rumination is, we're not making it sound like something fun that everyone should want to have an experience, because it isn't. Awful. It's awful. It really is. It's a feedback loop in your own mind that is, you feel like you're trying to jump off a wheel or claw your way out of, and it's really challenging to do without lots of curiosity and practice. And so like not trying to minimize it, but at the same time, it's taught me personally a lot about the way that my thoughts pattern out. Yeah. Right. About how quickly, like when you were talking in your story about how you were able to move through it pretty quickly when this happened fairly recently, because you were able to watch them, right? You were observing it in such an intentional way. Right. And so like, it's sort of an amazing gift to be able to think really hard and feel really hard about a lot of things, because really caring people do that, right? People that care behave that way. Right. It can be a slippery slope. It can be a dangerous place to be stuck. But at the end of the day, our rage or passion or whatever is also what fuels us to try to, help people, change people's lives, to, empower them, to inspire and offer them those practical skills that have helped us through our really tough moments and years. Yeah. So I think it's, we can start to change our relationship in a way to ruminating thoughts by understanding that at the end of the day, they are figments of our mind. Right. And the more we can learn about our mind, be curious about our mind and the way that our thoughts travel, the better off we're going to be at the end of the day. Because then we're going to be able to identify what we need with practice, with patience, with compassion for ourselves and grace. And the more we practice doing all of those things, the more like we are to recognize when other people are struggling, when they're being overreactive, or when they're saying something that they'll maybe regret later or whatever. And so it allows us to sort of let it go quicker because we've been there. Right.
And we've practiced it. And, I think one thing that you said, and I've done this work as well, and I think this is really important, is at times we've just sat with it and felt it. Yeah. Right. And it is so uncomfortable. But in my late teens and early 20s, like I was always just trying to push it away, trying to ignore it, trying to avoid it, like trying to react to it in a like, stop. Right. But I was giving it attention. Right. As opposed to just sitting with it, which is extremely uncomfortable. And I'm not saying everyone should do that. Sometimes sit with it with a therapist. Right. Like, but for like at least mine and your stories, I feel like part of our practice in the way of navigating it has been helped by sitting with it at some points.
Yeah, totally. 100%. Like identify the what's the word I'm looking for? Like the concept, identify the theme or the pattern. That just feels natural to me.
I love
identify. How it's, how it's showing up in, maybe even say the phrase out loud a couple of times. Right. Cause again, I feel like the more we say things out loud, the better we are to be able to rein them back in. So it's like another version of name it to tame it with your ruminating thoughts. Right. And so if say social anxiety is something that you like thinking about a social experience or whatever, right? Is the thing that keeps you coming, that keeps you up at night or whatever. Identify that that's the pattern or that's the moment or whatever it is. And so, catching it on a faster level will only help you to be able to actively problem solve. Yeah. Right. And actively do something about the rumination. Yeah. Right. And so that was my process with this recent story that I'm sharing. Right. It's just like noticing what's the language that I'm offering myself over and over again, kind of like yours. Right. Just observing it and then allowing it to be. For me, I really did. I needed to let it be for a little bit. And it's like, I'm not a bad person or, someone that's backsliding in my healing journey or whatever.
Right.
If I allow the rumination to sit for a bit,
Right.
That's how my mind needs to process something.
Exactly.
So it's not something you have to like self-soothe necessarily or get rid of right off the bat. Right. And so that's like strategy number 2. And then, come up with an active strategy that's going to be supportive. And it may take a lot of trial and error, and it may not work every time either. We say this like broken records.
Right.
But like when you were saying, it's like somatic holds and all the things that would normally serve you were not. And it's just like being okay to let go of your practices and move on to the next. And just remembering this too shall pass. Right. This too shall pass. Like everything else, you will get through it. This moment it may take time. It may take talking to someone, a therapist, a trusted loved one that deserves the information, or whatever. But it's like, you will get through it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Are we missing any strategies? Anything else you want to add?
No. I think it's good. And I think ultimately, like, once we can name our experience, we can figure out what we need next. And so I think that's it. We can have a ton of strategies, but if we don't know what we're experiencing, it's really hard to use them, to employ them.
Yeah.
Right. And so just naming the experience, right. And it could just be, I'm having negative thinking, right? You don't even have to say ruminating or obsessive, it's just, okay, my thoughts are extremely unpleasant and I don't want to sit with this. What are my options now that I've noticed my unpleasant thoughts?
Yeah. And I want to say too, that it's important that if you're listening to this and you have children or you're a teacher, an educator, talk to kids about this, right? Like both you and I shared, or no, just I had that too, but you had shared earlier that you didn't have the language, right? I know I certainly didn't either, but you had said it earlier. And it's like, what would happen, right? Let's wonder what would happen if children, if kids, if adolescents knew earlier to start tracking their thought patterns. If they knew what rumination was and were able to put that label to that experience, what might happen for them. Maybe they could start easing this stuff for themselves before the age of 40.
Right. Exactly. And it normalizes it.
Right.
That's the thing is when you have a label for it, it's like, oh, other people have this too, because there's a thing that explains it. It's like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly right. Okay. Abby, do you have a win of the week?
I do. I have a bunch of very teeny tiny ones, like so small.
Ooh,
so I'm going to pick one. And it's not a full win yet, but I think it's going to be a win.
Intriguing.
Yeah. So I'm going back to improv. I'm going back to improv classes.
Yay.
Yeah. And we know I love improv, but also I'm scared by improv. So I'm not like, even though I enjoy it, it terrifies me. Yeah. And I was supposed to start, Margot and I record on Wednesdays, and I was supposed to start Tuesday night, and they had to cancel the class I was in. And I had options. I could have a credit, I could get my money back, or I could go to another class. And I'm nervous. I'm going to go into a big, I don't know, anywhere from probably 8 to 16 people, a group of people, and do something that I haven't done in years. I haven't done improv in a class in years, right?
Yeah.
May or may not be like maskless, like I'm still concerned about COVID. And I had the choice. And the easiest choice would have been give me my money back. But I'm making a choice for my future self. And I figure that showing up, and I really thought that, I thought of when Melissa talked about being an anxiety warrior, Melissa Durker, and she said, you show up. Yes. And I was like, I have a podcast about being an anxiety warrior. I better freaking show up. Right.
Woo.
I didn't put that pressure on me. I thought of show up, and I was like, that's being an anxiety warrior, showing up even when you're afraid. So
yes.
I'm now going to class on Wednesdays, and I'm showing up tonight.
Yay.
And I'll let y'all know how it goes. But I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm sweaty. I got to wear black tonight so I don't sweat through everything. And
yeah, good call. You're setting yourself up for success already.
Yep.
Right. Pre-thinking about what your improv self is going to need later. After
I've already
years
pre-thought of how I'm going to introduce myself, like in case we have to introduce ourselves, like how do I label myself to these strangers, yeah.
Okay. I'm so excited for you. I really am. I know it's been a long time you've been waiting to do this, and hopefully everyone's amazing, which
hopefully.
Yeah.
And then I'm
you
trying
going back
to make
Josh's
friends,
spot?
So no, well, it's Josh's school.
Okay.
Right. But it's not him. He's not the teacher. But yeah, I mean, obviously, the intention aside from having fun is we keep talking about making friends. So
yeah,
maybe I'll make a friend.
Friends forever. I love it. I'm so excited for you.
Thanks.
I can't wait to hear about how it goes after the fact.
Yeah.
Yes. So next time you'll offer us some improv or you just update the Warriors on how it went after your first class.
That sounds great.
I love it.
Thanks.
That's awesome. Yay. Big win. Big win. All right, Warriors. Well, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. Let us know how you feel about rumination or obsessive thoughts or perseverating. What's been your experience with it? Or just think about it for yourself today, this week. Maybe you'd like to reflect on it in your journal or on a walk or in meditation or in any which way, shape, or form that feels good for you to think about it. Don't ruminate too hard on the rumination.
Yeah, right.
Don't let it consume you. What if you don't have any experience with rumination and now you start thinking incessantly about rumination? Oh gosh. Okay. Now I'm freaking myself out with that thought. Reach out to us if you'd like to connect for any reason. You can find us on Instagram. We're at Anxiety Warriors Podcast, or you can shoot us an email at anxietywarriorspodcast@gmail.com. You can shout out your wins of the week, share topic ideas with us. If you think you'd be a great fit as a guest on our show, we have an anxiety journey to share. We'd love to help you tell your story here on our platform. Take 2 seconds and smash that 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you tune in. Please be sure to follow the show. And you can like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have all of our episodes uploaded over there. Go ahead to YouTube. I mean, you won't be able to see our faces except for on like a stoic picture. But
yeah,
if that's your preferred method for listening, maybe you're like sitting in front of your computer or painting or playing games or working on emails or whatever, just pull us up on YouTube too.
Yeah, and subscribe. We just need 1,000 subscribers. So please be one of them.
We're just a handful away. Just kidding. We're like hundreds away from that.
We're 1,000 away.
Oh God. Anyway, so exactly. We Abby laughingly told us, she told me, hey, we need 1,000 subscribers to YouTube so we can start getting paid. And it was like, oh, we're just a few away. Haha, we're like all of that away. So yeah, take 2 seconds and start following us over there. Listen to our episodes over there if you can and you would like to. And tap on our threadless merch shop. You can find it in our show notes or in our link in bio on Instagram to buy yourself something fun, some Anxiety Warriors podcast merch that we are selling up there. And I think that's it. That's all the things.
Nailed it.
Boom.
Thank you all so much for going on this journey with us. So grateful y'all are here and that we get to do this with you. Oh my God, I was going to obsess about it. Oh my God, I was going to obsess. If I didn't say it, I would have had to re-record me saying it and put it in because that would have been an obsessive thought. Right? We are so grateful that we get to do this with you every week.
Till next time.